how do we take some of the things we've been talking about today, how do we take them and apply them in our culture in the barns with our people? Now, it's interesting because that can be quite a challenge sometimes, because some of our people maybe are not on the same page as us in their values, in what's important to them, what their priorities are. I'm reminded of a story of 3 gentlemen that died on the same day. Showed up to heaven. They meet St. Peter. Peter's looking at all of their profiles, and he says, I see you're all golfers. Well, if you guys don't mind, we'll just put you all together and you can just golf together. Now, one of the things you need to know about heaven is we have all the golf courses you could ever imagine. You can golf for thousands of years and never golf the same hole twice. You guys are going to love it because you're avid golfers. So they're all excited. And Peter tells them, there's just one thing. We've got all of these golf courses. There's just one rule. Okay? God is very fond of his ducks. Don't hit a duck. So they said, doesn't seem like too much of a problem, but Peter says there's serious consequences for hitting one of God's ducks. So they all go and they golf for several months. Nobody hits a duck. Everybody's having a great time golfing all of these different golf courses. And sure enough, one of the guys hits a duck. Immediately, St. Peter comes flying over one of the hills on the golf course. And he's got somebody with him. And as they get closer, they can see that the individual that St. Peter has with him is a significantly unattractive woman. All right? Significantly unattractive woman is now with St. Peter in the golf cart, comes right up to the guy who hits the duck and says, look, I told you there were consequences for hitting one of God's ducks. Takes out a pair of handcuffs this significantly unattractive woman to the golfer who hit the duck, and says, from now on, this is your punishment. So that guy leaves. The other 2 guys golf for months and years, and sure enough, it happens again. One of the guys hits a duck. Immediately, St. Peter comes over the hill in the golf cart. Another significantly unattractive woman and a pair of handcuffs says, you know what the consequences were? This is what happens when you hit one of God's ducks. Well, the third guy, he's golfing for years and years, thinks he's got it all figured out. He's just having a great time. Pretty soon, one day, St. Peter comes over a hill, and he's got somebody in a golf cart with him. And he's watching and he's looking. And it's this gorgeous woman. Just drop dead gorgeous. And he comes right up to this golfer, doesn't say a thing, takes her, handcuffs her to him, and leaves. And he says, wow, what did I do to deserve this? And she says, look, buddy, I don't know. All I did was I was golfing and hit a duck. Sometimes we think we've got it all figured out. Sometimes we know that what we're doing just seems like the best thing, and everything's going smooth, so there's not a problem. Well, as we look at how we improve our culture in the barns, sometimes we make some choices that seem right, but they're just not. And you can see you got a mariachi band there, and everybody's playing well together, and you got a set of bagpipes. Something's wrong. And the caption is, I know he's your brother-in-law, but it's just not working. Okay? Sometimes we get people that just don't fit into our operation. Well, as we continue on, what do you think? Do you think that today's employees are naturally drawn to or instinctively interested in the core values that are essential in your business? What do you think? You think you think all the people that you hire have the exact same set of values that you have? They fit right in. You don't have to explain anything to them. No. Why? They got their own set of values. They come with their own set of values. Why else? They just want a job. They just want a job. They don't have the same priorities that you have. Right? What else? Yeah. It can be a lot of different things, but for the most part, they probably don't. they probably don't automatically or naturally come into your environment with the same set of core values. So as we look at this, we need to ask, and we wanted to talk today about being a professional, improving the professionalism of the barn culture, making our barn culture more professional. What do you think are some of the words or phrases that you think it is to be a professional? When somebody says, we try and create a professional environment, what are the kinds of things you think they're talking about? Or what would you talk about? Words or phrases. Throw them out. Caring, okay. Consistent. What else? Fair, all right. Professional. Professional environment. I'll give you a few things to go on. All those are good. All of those are good. They're ethical. They have a propensity or a natural desire to do the right thing. Okay? They're mature. They have solid morals. They go beyond the average expectations. I hear this all the time in the operations that I work with across the country. We have too many people that just come and do the bare minimum and they leave. And that's it. They don't want to do anything extra. They don't look for how much do I really need to be doing. Are they businesslike? They're people that have an ownership mentality. They won't leave until things are done. They take care of the equipment. They take care of the livestock like it's their own. It's a hard thing to find. And so when we talk about professional culture, this is what we're talking about. They do more than a minimum, and they have that consistent, positive attitude. Those are just some of the things that I throw. It can be a lot of different things, and you need to define these for your own culture, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you do that. Well, what is culture? We talk about culture all the time. What is it? Well, it's culture defined as those widely shared values, behaviors, and practices of the company's employees. They're widely shared, okay? And they're the practices and the values and the behaviors that a company has. Who sets the culture? Who decides what that is? If it doesn't happen, right, yeah. It can happen by default. If we aren't deliberately setting our culture, you'll have one. Every place has a culture. It may not be the one you want. Okay? And basically, if we were just to define it, it's the way we do things around here. It's the way crap gets done around this place. Okay? And that's what your culture is. I have some places that I work with that if somebody gets a DUI, okay, and ends up in jail, they talk around the owners and the managers and say, okay, whose turn is it to go get them now? And they'll bail them out, and they'll let them come back, and they'll work through, and they'll help them through the court, and, whatever else it is, and they'll make sure they've got a ride, and, it's just, hey, we're just helping a guy out or a gal out, and we're gonna help them through this. I have other places, you end up in jail for anything, don't even call us. That's not our culture. We're just not interested. You just burned up your employment card. You want to sue us, you want to do anything about it, you go right ahead. Because our culture just does not have people that end up in jail. It's that simple. Both extremes, both have their own culture. Both of those positions that they take have positives and negatives. Okay? But the culture there is clear in each of those places. The place that doesn't respond to anybody, they don't take any calls from the jail, okay? There's nobody there that goes that has any kind of a record or any kind of, if the sheriff knows who they are by name, they don't apply at that place. All right? They just don't go. And they've established that as their culture. I came to see, this is Louis Gerstner, who's was the CEO of IBM. I came to see in my time at IBM that culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game. Culture is the game. If you want to get things done, if you want to have an environment that works where people are together and going in the same direction. Louis Gerstner found out at IBM, a huge multinational company, that culture is the game. And that's quoted in the book, How the Mighty Fall by Jim Collins. Jim Collins also is the guy that wrote Good to Great. And what was the one before that? Built to Last. Built to Last. Yeah. All three are excellent books. All three are excellent books. Yeah. Culture is that important. Why? Well, it sets those expectations. It influences either positively or negatively. It influences the behaviors of everyone associated with the business. And it directly affects performance. We quite often have performance issues that are cultural issues throughout the operation because the expectation for performance is set pretty low. Don't worry about that. Nobody takes care of that. That's an old piece of equipment. Don't take care of it. Nobody even bothers to change the oil anymore. It's a cultural attitude and behavior that's established. Positively, we have other places that the culture there is you will not get on the seat of that vehicle unless you have checked the oil, checked all the fluids, made sure it's greased, know who ran it last, had any questions about how it was run. And they take care of their stuff. It's a cultural issue. It is the culture they have established. That's with equipment. You can imagine the same thing with animals that are part of the culture as far as how the animals are cared for, the level of attention that they receive, the amount of time that's spent in each area, the quickness with which problems are addressed are all culturally established behaviors. So we need to understand how deep that is. Now, I also want to talk about personal values because we talked about it. Sometimes the individuals help to develop the culture. Well, their culture, the culture they establish, comes from their personal values. And the personal values are those principles used by an individual to determine how they face the world and relate to others. Pretty big and broad definition, but it is that big. It is that big. And as we think about that, understand that individuals' personal values are not affected. They're not affected by who they're with, by the circumstances or the situations, or by positive or negative reinforcement from others. That's how deep personal values are. The individual who finds himself in a situation where they're with people that are behaving in a way that they just will not be like, will walk away. That's that personal value. That's how deep that value is. But if they're with this group of people and they'll behave this way and this group of people that way, that's their personal value. That value is placed on who I'm. Their values are totally different than that individual who says, I have this core value. That doesn't matter who I'm with. I'm going to defend that, or I'm not going to talk that way, or I'm not going to make those kinds of references, or I'm not going to accept those kinds of standards. Okay? And that's where those values come from. Questions on culture or values at this point. We're going to talk very specifically, look very specifically at that, and as you get proceedings, you'll have a copy of all this information. I'm going to give you an example of a situation that kind of reveals individual personal values. Now, I'm not going to put I'm going to give you an example. I want you to think about it. I want you to not talk about your response to this situation, what you personally would do in this situation. I don't want you to talk about it. I don't want you to share any notes. I want you to just either record or remember your answer, okay? And then we'll talk about it. But this is a situation that I want you to get an idea of how you would respond. Okay. You're driving late at night. It's cold and raining heavily. You are in a hurry and very tired. You drive past a bus stop where 3 people are standing in the rain. None of them have umbrellas. You know that the bus that they're waiting for is notorious for running extremely late, especially in bad weather. One of the 3 people is a person that you literally owe your life to. They literally saved your life a few years ago in a near-fatal accident. So that's one of the people. Another one of the people is an elderly woman that appears that if she doesn't get out of the rain very soon, she could actually die. She looks that bad off. The third person is someone that you have always wanted to meet. In fact, you've always felt that if you could get to know this person better, your life would be almost perfect. All of your problems would be solved, and you might even live happily ever after. So those are your three people. Here's your situation. You have an umbrella, your car is a small two-seater, and there's only room in your car for one other person. What do you do? Now, where I got this from someone else, and we have both tried to track down exactly where this came from. What I had heard was that this is actually a values assessment, a character assessment that a large international company uses to determine if you have the values that that they're looking for. They had one answer they were looking for. I think there are a lot of other answers. Okay. They have one answer that they were looking for. Brian's answer was the one that they look for. They think that that is the way that it helps the most people. But they admitted that there are other ways to do it. In fact, they said, we know of another company that that's the response they would do. They would expect their employee, if they're busy and it's late in the day and they got stuff to do, keep driving. You don't have time. And that's what they expect of their employees. What was interesting was, I use this in Midwestern audiences all the time, and somebody always comes up with that answer really quick. Their study shows that of the people that they interview, 1 in 200 comes up with the answer that they're looking for. 1 in 200 comes up with that. And it always comes up. It's always the first or second response in an agricultural Midwestern audience, which has to do with, I think, a regional culture. Okay. So understand that we have to understand that there are different possible responses to these different situations, and you all did very well in talking about them. Let's briefly look at what some of the warning signs are for a culture that may be undesirable. You've got high turnover, you've got a minimal time at work. These are people that show up at the last minute, and the first minute they can leave, they're out of there. Low attendance at company-sponsored events. An us versus them mentality between the employees and the management. Consistently poor performance. These are all, and this is not a cumulative list where you have to have all of these. Any one of these can be an indication of a particular part of your culture that is maybe not what you want it to be. A lack of sincere care for animal well-being. People that just don't seem to care about how well the animals are doing. They can walk into a nursery room, and the dead of winter, one of the big fans is blowing and the heater is out, and it just doesn't strike their mind that maybe they need to do something. Okay? They just don't seem to care. And so that can be an indication. And maybe it's not that blatant. Maybe they just have that ability to walk past that sow in the ferrying house that's not eating, or they have that ability to walk past that animal that needs a little bit of special attention. Minimal social interaction at work between employees. Sometimes if we have several employees and it seems like they just don't interact very much at work, that can be an indication to us that our culture could use some improvement. And indifference to performance. They don't care whether performance is good or bad. For the business, they also don't care whether their performance is good or bad. Chronically blaming others and frequent inappropriate remarks. Focusing on other people's flaws. These individuals that, nothing is their fault, but boy, they're the first one to point out that somebody else screwed up. A disinterest in personal improvement. They don't care if they're improving on their own or developing or learning new skills. A lack of common courtesy. A poor safety record. A high accident rate. Do you know that in Frankfort, Indiana, we have one of the companies, and I have heard both ways, they're either number 1 or number 2 in the world, a safety record. DSM Neo Resins on the west side of town. When you drive past there, it's one of the first businesses on 28 on the north side of the road. DSM Neo Residence has gone 25, maybe 26 years now without a lost work accident. That's a long time without a lost work accident. Now, they handle, a good friend of mine is the warehouse manager there. They handle some very, very caustic chemicals. He said, there is nothing more important here than safety. We'll teach you everything else, but if you come in and we get a sense that you just don't understand safety, you're out of here. They recently had an opening that in their warehouse where they were handling the chemicals and loading them and unloading them. They went through 60 people and did not find one person that met their standard for safety. And some of them were PhDs. They just didn't get the sense that they understood how important it is for them to be safe. So they established that culture. That's not by accident that they go 25 years without a lost work accident. Ongoing unresolved personal conflicts and disinterest in new ideas. These are just kind of warning signs. There can be other things. There can be one or two of these things. There can be several of them. So if you see some of these, you've got some work to do on your culture. The next thing is, well, if we're going to talk about the negative things, let's talk about the positive things. If I've got a good culture, what are the types of things that I would probably see? Early arrival and people hanging around after work. These are people that come in, they're there a little early, they get a cup of coffee, they're glad to see everybody come in. When the work is done, they kind of stand around a little bit, chit-chat, get caught up with each other, and talk about the next day, and, they just seem to enjoy being there. Nobody's left out. They like to make sure that everybody gets done, they don't leave somebody else, they don't leave somebody behind to do things on their own because they're, nobody likes working with them, or they just, wow, that person's always slow. In a good culture, they will go and they will teach that person how to get done on time. New people are welcomed enthusiastically. When that new person comes in, they're looking forward to it. They're saying, great, we got somebody new coming in, and everybody wants to get to know them, everybody wants to work with them, everybody wants to bring them up to speed very rapidly so that everybody's job is easier because we've got this new person. They have a zero tolerance for poor performance or poor attitudes. They do that themselves. They have a zero tolerance policy within the breeding barn employee group, the breeding department. They got zero tolerance for people screwing up or screwing off. Okay? They just don't put up with it. Somebody shows up late, a couple of days in a row, somebody there takes care of it. They got somebody whose handwriting is kind of bad, and they can't read those breeding records. They take care of it right there. They say, look, I can't read this. Straighten this up. And they take care of it right there. The manager never even knows, quite often, in this kind of an environment because they take care of it themselves in their department. The animals come first. And I'll tell you, it's interesting getting around to a lot of different livestock operations, dairies, feedlots, ranches, and confinement hogs. I'll tell you, I can just kind of tell the attitude that people have about the livestock when I walk in. And I just get to know them a little bit. I can tell what their priorities are. And if they have a zero tolerance when it comes to how the livestock are treated, how they're taken care of, how much they care for them. A consistent acceptance of responsibility. Something goes wrong, people come up and say, what happened? What do we need to do? They don't avoid it. They're kind of like firemen. Firemen run into the burning building. People in a good culture run toward the responsibility. They want to take care of it. They don't want it to linger. They want to fix the problem and move on. Employees hold each other accountable. We talked a little bit about that. Strong desire for personal improvement opportunities. It's interesting. I do several hundred one-on-one conversations with employees every year. And I love hearing that. I want to learn some more stuff. I've taken everything that they can give me here. I'd really like to go to some more conferences. I'd like to get an opportunity to learn more. That's a great thing to hear from your people. They want to grow and develop. Conflicts are handled immediately and completely resolved. This doesn't mean that, if two people are not getting along, the manager calls them in, sets them down in the office and says, I'll be back in 5 minutes, straighten this out. Okay? They don't do that. what they do is the manager goes and talks to one, goes and talks to the other, brings them together, sits them down, and we work out a thing together. We work out a solution together. And the last thing the manager says is, okay, who else have you talked to about this? Actually, I don't need to know who else you've talked to about this. I need you to go and tell them that it's over. That's how it's solved completely. When everybody else in the unit that knows that there was this thing going on, and they go back to their armies that they've developed to defend them, and they go to them and they take care of it. That gets the conflict completely resolved. And there's no accidents or and there's that really high safety consciousness. One other area we need to talk about. I have gone into operations. They've asked me to come in and help. How do we improve our culture? How do we raise the level of caring for the animals? How do we raise the attitude around here? The attitude around here stinks. How do we fix that? What we find sometimes in working with people, and I talk to them one-on-one, I find out they've got some things in the way of them getting along as well as they can. And we need to understand that these barriers can exist, and we have to work at the same time that we're trying to develop a positive culture, we have to get the barriers out of the way that are preventing a positive culture from coming around on its own. Immaturity. If you have employees in your group that are just not mature. They don't make good decisions. They say the wrong things. They irritate people. They are just, they just aren't ready for the workplace. You've got to fix that. Now, fix that means you can put them on an accelerated program to where they grow up pretty quick. Or fix it means that they're given very clear instructions as to what they can and can't say, what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior, and they're given 30 days to fix it. And they don't fix it, they're gone. And you outline that. When we want to change behavior, we have to be very specific and let them know exactly what we want them to change and give them a deadline, hold them accountable, work with them. And when the deadline is up, they're either there or they're not. Quite frankly, what I find, it's another one of those 80-20s. And about 80%, when they get that list, they'll take it and go with it. They want to fix it. About 20%, they see that list and they're out of there. They just quit. And when they're walking out the door, say, thank you very much. This was a whole lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Okay? The Lone Rangers, those individuals that are there, they kind of have their own agenda. You wonder why they're there, because they're obviously not there for you. Okay? But they got their own agenda. They got their own things they want to do. They don't want to work with anybody else. They just want to take care of their job, go do their thing, and they're out the door. Got to take care of the Lone Rangers because they short-circuit any opportunity to develop people to work together. Bigotry, bias, sexism, prejudice, any of those kinds of comments or any of those kinds of behaviors, or you see people segregating or avoiding certain people for any reason, have to take care of that. That does not work for developing culture, a positive culture. A lack of support from superiors and supervisors, upper management. If there are people down there that really want to change and really want to develop a good culture, and it's their supervisor or it's one of the owners that just seems to come in, and every time they go through, it's like somebody stirred up stirred up the hornet's nest. That's a problem. They need the support. They need that consistency. And inconsistency is another problem. When they feel like they're following the rules and the rules keep changing. They don't feel like there's anything here to follow. They don't have this good understanding of what it takes to be and do the appropriate behaviors. They'll have a difficulty with developing that. That's a barrier that needs to be removed, and a lack of vision if they don't know, again, where we're headed, what our priorities are. No rules for behavior. If they don't know what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior, they'll try and develop them themselves, and they may or may not be the right rules. No accountability. They know the rules, but nobody's holding them accountable to it. People behave however they want. They say whatever they want, and nobody's there to cut them off or to correct that behavior. And then inequity, where they just get the perception that things are not fair. These are all things that get in the way. So you've got three categories now. You've got the barriers that can get in the way that we have control. We have significant control over improving them. We have indicators of a positive culture, and we have indicators of a negative culture. And we look at these three lists, and we start to work on them one at a time. We start to identify the things that may exist, and we say, is this getting us in the right direction or the wrong direction for developing our culture? Here are examples of core values. One of the things that's interesting is that for some reason in about the last 10 or 15 years, we've had to actually sit people down. We've had to sit employees down and explain what we mean by honesty. It is not a commonly understood term, we're finding. Because for some, honesty means whatever works for me. It doesn't mean right or wrong. It doesn't mean truth. It doesn't mean accuracy. It means what I need it to mean right now for me. So we have to define what we mean by our values. Now, some would say, and it's an extensive list. As I work with operations to develop their core values, I always ask them for their list, what they think is important. Then we put up a list like this and see if did we miss something. I like to see somewhere around 4 or 5 as a minimum, 10 as a maximum, okay? And really focus in on those. Once you get past 10, it looks like kind of a laundry list, okay? You've got to decide for your operation which ones seem to be the most important, and you have to define them. You have to define what you mean by community involvement. You have to define what you mean by environmental stewardship, by honesty, and all of the others that are up there, by passion and stockmanship and ethical behavior and excellence. All of these, you have to define them so they know what you mean. And you have to enforce them. You have to reinforce them. I have a 70,000 head feedlot in eastern Nebraska I've worked with for several years. We're to this point now. They've got about a little over 100 employees. And we've gotten all the structural things done. It's a family operation that's grown significantly over 15 years. 15 years ago they had, I think, 15 employees and 1 feed yard. They now have 3 feed yards and I think 7 other businesses. They just bought a semi-trailer, a dump trailer manufacturer because they needed more manufacturing space for some of the other things that they do, so they just bought that. It just kind of helped round out their business. So they've grown really fast, but they've kind of gotten ahead. Their business entrepreneurship and creativity and business acumen got ahead of the development of their people. And so that's what we're working on, and it got ahead of their culture development. And they said, we need to back up a step. We need to reinforce caring for equipment, caring for animals. Safety. Safety's become a major concern of theirs. They had a death at one of the 3 feed yards. They had, and in the last 3 years, I can think of 4 employees that have been out for at least 4 months with major injuries. One guy, when they took him away in the ambulance, everybody was looking at their calendars when the funeral was going to be. They've had some bad accidents, and we had to back up and take care of safety. Okay? So you have to define these, and you have to reinforce them. And now that's what we're at. We defined the core values at the beginning of the year. We reworded, updated the employee handbook, put the core values right in there with definitions, handed out a separate sheet with all the core values listed. And now what we're working on is with the managers reinforcing those core values. And the way that we reinforce our core values is that when we sit down with them and we are interviewing someone for a new job, we pull out the list of core values. Normally we pull out a copy of the job description, maybe an employee handbook, and we go through that. Now we also pull out a list of core values and we explain them. And we ask them, are there any part of these core values that you have questions about or that you feel like are going to be difficult for you to stay with and to behave within these? We, during the orientation process, that's interviewing before we even hire them. The next thing we do is an orientation. When they come in that first day and we're getting the paperwork, they see the core values again. When we have a disciplinary action that we take, we're going to write somebody up. We include in the disciplinary report the core values that were also disobeyed, or that they operated outside of, to in whatever they did that created the situation that they needed to be disciplined for. When we have regular meetings, departmental meetings, those managers now, we talk specifically about how to bring that up in a meeting. When we see the behaviors that we want, we talk about that. We say, hey, the other day when Brad was out there and we had trouble with that pen of cattle, and he was patient, and he didn't get carried away, and he told everybody, just give me a minute, just everybody just step back, give me a minute, let the cattle calm down. That's one of our core values. That's stockmanship. We didn't have 5 pen riders hop in there with hot shots and just force them up that alley. Okay, that's what we're talking about. And so we bring them up in those situations and in just regular company meetings. So we have ways to reinforce the core values, the things that we want. We have to talk about them. We have to list them, define them, talk about them, and reinforce them. Okay? How do they know that they need to change their culture, and how well do they do it changing it themselves, or they really need somebody else to do it? I couldn't answer the ones that don't bring somebody in. I would say that if you have somebody who's interested in changing the culture, and I've seen it happen at the very lowest levels in an operation and at the upper levels. Anybody in an operation can change the culture. Anybody. Okay? I've seen it done. And if there's somebody there that wants to change it, they can do it. They don't need a coach to come in and help them do it. What normally happens, at least the times that we realize now we have to focus on culture, is when we've done all of the other stuff. We've provided the structure. We've got, a lot of places that I start with, they don't have an employee handbook. They don't even have a set of ground rules to operate on. You can't try and establish culture when it's not even defined, when you don't even have behavioral expectations set, when there's not even a written vacation policy. How can you establish your culture and what your expectation level is of your people? So a lot of times we make sure we get an employee handbook in place. We make sure that we have, and if you don't have an employee handbook now, I would love to represent one of your employees when there's a problem, because in court you will lose. And if you think that just because you're a small operation with 4 or 5 or 10 employees that you're not going to get sued, I got news for you. Okay? If they've gotten to the little mom and pop places, and it is so, there are so many now that seem that that's the way that they solve problems, that it can come to you. Okay? If you don't have job descriptions, written job descriptions, same way. I would much rather defend the employee in a dispute over their termination, over their performance. Because if you don't have a written job description, their representative can say, how can you fire them for not doing their job? You don't even have their job defined. It's not in writing. How can you do that? They will win that case. Okay? So, job descriptions, employee handbooks, we make sure we have all of those in place. Performance evaluations, so and a written, formal employee evaluation once a year at least, seems to be about right. Maybe twice, 90 days, 6 months the first year, and then everybody's on a regular once a year schedule. We sit down, we go through it, we talk about it. There's a really good procedure for doing that to make sure that you've got your bases covered, and you're making it a positive thing. They learn about it. And so you can, so we get all those, and then we try and get those in place, and we get the supervisors, the managers, the department heads to really reinforce those. And we see how well we do. A lot of times just getting that documentation done does a lot for the culture, just in and of itself, because now we have a set of rules to follow. Now if we start to see some breaks in performance, some individuals that just don't seem to get it, a particular department, the farrowing department's doing really well, the breeding department stinks, okay? We've got to maybe work on the culture there, because they're all operating pretty much on the same set of rules, but there's a culture in one. These guys are laughing back here. It happens, okay? You can have a half of the operation smoking, just smoking, And the other half, you're wondering what planet they're on. It just can't. They just won't come along. You have to get involved in that. You have to get engaged in that and find out what's going on. And sometimes it's pretty hard. Sometimes it's pretty hard to do. I know the operations that I go in, I shower in, spend 15 minutes, 30, 45 minutes with each of the employees individually. I come back and report, not who said what. I keep it pretty confidential. But you'd be amazed at what they'll tell a stranger. And they won't tell you. You'd be amazed. And there are some nuggets in there that are pretty easy to pull together and say, here's what we've got, here's what we need to do. We map out a strategy and we start.